but you can see it as of today. It's on view, and we have 11 works on view. Several of them, a few of them were from pieces we'd collected in the past 5 years, but the bulk of the show really does represent this initiative that we have undertaken in the past year. There are 11 works on view. And we really see this as a major step for the museum. So to begin, I just want to take you around. This is we're doing a virtual tour due to social distancing. So I just want to show you a few of the works on view. I do want to point out, this is the most recent work. We just got it in like a week ago. And this work by John Biggers just came in a few days ago. This work is by Damon Melanson, who is based in New Orleans. And it's one of the works that I will spend a little less time on. So if you just look around the gallery, you can see our Carrie Mae Weems piece, a Gordon Parks photograph. This is a photograph associated with Dred Scott's major reenactment of an 1811 slave revolt. A new piece by Mario Moore. We were able to acquire a piece out of the Leticia Huckabee exhibition that just closed, that was in the gallery just before this opened, a Radcliffe Bailey and a Whitfield Lovell. So that's a quick spin around the gallery. And then I think I'll just start kind of diving into a few of these pieces. So the first one that we're looking at right now is a piece by Carrie Mae Weems. We acquired this on the occasion of her solo exhibition, which was in 2018 at the museum. She was visiting artist with the School of Art. Again, indebted to Winifred and Kevin Reilly for kind of kicking off their a major effort at collecting with this piece. And it's really been a wonderful piece to add to the collection because it so explicitly addresses the really difficult history of Louisiana. And you can see the text that's included in Carrie Mae Weems' image here says, "While sitting upon the ruins of your remains, I pondered the course of history." And so she is literally embodying this role as witness. She's in kind of 19th century costume. And she did this project as part of this larger project called the Louisiana Project that was undertaken with Tulane on the occasion of the bicentennial of the Louisiana Purchase. And so we have this image, and then I wanted to give a fuller context here because the images that go kind of with that kind of composition that she employs in our image include her looking at several plantation or antebellum Greek revival homes in Louisiana. This image, she's in the same house. It's the Whitney House, which is now a bed and breakfast in New Orleans. That's the house she's seated in our piece. This one, I believe, is at Chalmette Battlefield. And then she also brings us to the present. So she's witnessing the past, and in that same costume, that historic costume, she's continuing to witness contemporary life. So what she's doing is compelling us to act as witness with her. You know, she's got her back to us. We're almost seeing this through her eyes, but we can't forget that she was there too, as in a role as an enslaved woman, as a chambermaid. She even says as a whore in the book that goes along with this project, which I have here today. So we see her standing outside industrial sites. We see her standing outside of public housing that was actually demolished after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. She's standing and looking at this billboard that's incredibly racially insensitive. It's a Coors Light ad. And so she's compelling us to consider history, consider the course of history, and think about these ongoing socioeconomic structures that we're still witnessing today and really attend to those legacies of oppression that are ongoing. The second piece I want to talk about is one that we acquired in early May of last year. It's by Gordon Parks, and it was from his series that he called kind of Segregation in the South, or the Segregation series. But it ran as part of a Life magazine assignment in 1956. At that time, Life magazine reached 20% of the American population that was over 10, age of 10. So that we're talking about 23 million people seeing this story. It ran as The Restraints Open and Hidden. In 1956, for some context, 1954 was Brown versus Board of Education decision. 1955 was when Emmett Till was, atrociously murdered. And then this piece came out. And his assignment was to go to Alabama, which he referred to as hostile territory or the motherland of racism, and photograph one family and kind of how segregation affected their daily lives or their movement, really document their lives. And so we see on the left kind of the matriarch and patriarch of this family, the Thorntons. And then there's also a focus on all of their children. So several of their kids went on to college, and it documents kind of their life in Shady Grove, Alabama, which is about 100 miles northeast of Mobile. And then one daughter lived in Mobile. Another son was a professor at Fisk University in Nashville. So you could see kind of the varying degrees of what their life was like, depending on educational attainment or and what constraints they experienced in like a rural setting versus a city setting. And it's really interesting. Alma Lee, who appears in this bottom right photo, was a teacher at the time, and she was quoted in Life magazine as saying that integration was essential for justice for African Americans. And her family was essentially run out of town for that. She lost her job as a teacher, their possessions were taken away. No one would, even let them fill their cars up with gas at the filling station during that time. So she had to move away, and actually was, to a degree, looked after by Gordon Parks and Life magazine after the events surrounding this. So Gordon Parks and his kind of partner were almost run out of town at the same time. It was a really dangerous undertaking doing this story. So 26 pictures were published in 1956, but more recently 200 transparencies were found. And I believe that our photograph comes from those. And this was taken in Shady Grove after a kind of church service. And so it's just this moment in this community, everyday lives, and this woman just looking at the camera very directly. The next piece I want to talk about is this piece that resulted from Dred Scott's reenactment. I'll go ahead and show this. So there's an entire website, and you can see the link at the top of the screen. Dred Scott organized in 2019 a slave rebellion reenactment that retraced the path of the largest rebellion of enslaved people from Laplace, Louisiana to Congo Square. And there are hundreds of reenactors. There were hundreds of people involved too in organizing this massive reenactment on both sides, people doing costumes. And we have a photograph of one reenactor, Malcolm Suber, you can see it left. And we actually have another photograph of Denise Frazier. These are both New Orleans residents. Malcolm Suber is an activist with Take 'em Down NOLA, which has really advocated for the removal of symbols of white supremacy, Confederate monuments. And he was part of the reenactment. The photographs that we have were actually commissioned by Vogue magazine and taken by David Halliday. So these have been a really great addition to the collection too. The whole reenactment offers this kind of what if moment, this ability for people today to embody resistance and consider revolutionary action. And Dred Scott, who's a really well-known artist and activist, has said that understanding the past, that the past was not predetermined, opens the ability for people to dream of what if for the future. So some of the things that I appreciate most about these works that are added to the collection are really the potential for reimagining and kind of reclaiming and models for revolutionary action that are suggested by these acquisitions. So I would encourage you to check out this website and learn more about this entire reenactment. The next piece, this is a really exciting acquisition. It's by Mario Moore, a pretty recent grad of Yale painting school. And I hope to bring him in the future as a visiting artist. I will say this is a quick, gallery tour on the occasion of the opening of this exhibit, but we really hope to hear from the artist either virtually in the future or after the pandemic by bringing several of these artists in so we can have like real engagements and get them involved with LSU students and community, potentially East Baton Rouge Parish schools, like we do with visiting artists. So we hope to do that in the future. But I've had a great conversation with Mario Moore, and he shared so much with me about this piece. It has a really fun story. So it's super complex. There's a painting within a painting. So what we're looking at is a depiction of the Battle of Antietam, which was part of the Civil War. And it pretty directly led kind of this turning of tide when Lincoln felt he could release the Emancipation Proclamation. And so this is the first piece in a series that Mario Moore has developed to kind of contend with that legacy, what it means for Black men, this living in the context of this history of emancipation and the Civil War. And so we see here his fellow artist, Mark Gibson, holding his dog in his studio space. You can see the marks of, painting on the wall. You can see paint on his fingertips. And the story is that Mark and Mario would go to the Met, and they would see this piece by Peter Paul Rubens, A Fox and Wolf Hunt, and just really struck by it. Mario was, drawn in by this action, by the texture, kind of considering where Peter Paul Rubens was actively engaged or where his workshop was engaged. And it just inspired this, what Mario Moore referred to as a call and response, kind of riffing off of this. And Mark Gibson and Mario Moore would go back and forth. Like Mario painted this from Mark's drawing. And from what I understand, Mark Gibson is more of a graphic artist. And so you can see these really kind of graphic, chaotic, Mario said even almost like comic book style rendering of this battle. It's quite gory. You can see some elements here, kind of a floating head in this piece. And so they worked together to kind of collaborate to make this piece, although ultimately the piece that we're looking at was painted by Mario. So aside from the battle and kind of that connection with Peter Paul Rubens, there's also all this commentary on kind of Black masculinity. And Mario talks about adding these kind of signifiers of care. We have Mark Gibson here with his dog. You can see again the paint on his fingertips. These kind of white flowers kind of beneath this battle scene, almost signifying this solemn moment, almost a memorial. And then we also have Mark Gibson staring straight at us, kind of claiming his artistic space, claiming this studio space, and just reclining, relaxing. And so it's really a powerful statement. Also, I just want to note these details that are markers of time. You can see the battle date is included, but also a timestamp for the contemporary. You can tell these are very, 2020 Apple plugs that will always date this piece to a very specific moment. Also on view is a piece you may have seen before, and I think Grant is going to throw up a link to our talk with Katrina Andrew last summer about this piece. It's called The Unfit Mommy and Her Spawn Will Wreck Your Comfortable Suburban Existence. It was kind of an earlier acquisition. It was from 2019. It had been on view before that, and we just really hoped to acquire it, and then finally found funding to do that through a prior deaccession. And so in this work, Katrina is really contending with stereotypes often associated with Black bodies. So she projects those stereotypes onto white bodies. She's got a play on blackface where she makes this male character have what she calls watermelon face. And so she's just thinking, I think there's a lot here about female reproduction, these stereotypes about Black women having too many children that are then burdens to the state, or like her title says, threatens the comfortable suburban existence. And we saw a lot of this come up in the past year in political commentary. And so you can kind of read them as like a high school Adam and Eve style couple. We've got the snake, we've got the egg. And in the background, you can also see she's playing with these kind of stereotypes of African imagery. So she was inspired by the quote unquote African patterns that you find at like Joann Fabrics, like national chains that are kind of really reductive applications or reductive symbols of Africanness that are popular in culture. This is a great piece we just acquired. It's on view for the first time, also through the gift of Winifred and Kevin Reilly. It's called Two Strikes. And I can't speak better for this piece than Madelyn does herself in her artist statement when she writes, "Do you know what it means to be a human being who has two strikes?" Well, let me inform you, I am Black and I am a woman. And she takes us through some of the exclusionary statistics for Black women seeing themselves in artistic spaces and in museums. And this self-portrait was created for an exhibition that specifically addressed that. And so it's called Two Strikes, and it's now on view. And I do hope at some point we get to hear from Madelyn herself. And I would encourage you to check out her Instagram, because she has a really long kind of time lapse of her creation of this piece. And it's just beautiful. So don't miss the chance to see that. Let's see. We also recently acquired this piece by Whitfield Lovell, which is on view for the first time. Whitfield Lovell is well known, another MacArthur Genius Award grant winner. Just like Carrie Mae Weems, we have some really, really important American artists now in our collection, thanks to this initiative, including this work, which is kind of part of his tableau style, where he takes found wood, just distressed as it is, and then he does these drawings directly on it. So Whitfield Lovell works from kind of a photo archive. He had family images, but he also collects images at flea markets, antique stores, things like that. And then he draws them directly. And so a lot of times his images that he works from are from like 1850 to 1950, this intervening period where a lot of history, African-American history in particular, is whitewashed. And so he takes these sitters, typically he's working from studio portraits, specifically because those are moments when the sitters had control and they were, he says, produced for their pleasure and posterity. So one of those times when they could step out of kind of the confines of society's expectations and present themselves as they chose. And so he creates these pieces that are almost like retablo, like altar-like, where we see a photograph of a person, and then he adds an object that is just resonant in some way to him. But there's never a direct one-to-one connection. And, you know, he would say his pieces are not portraits. They're really about kind of evoking this experience and creating this space for each visitor to connect with it, with resonant images or the resonance of these boards that would have been in spaces that someone lived in barns or houses, and then pairing it with an object. And there's no specific order in the way that they're created. It's kind of what strikes him in that moment. This could have gone for a long time without the object being added, for example, and then the right object strikes him. Or he has said that, you know, sometimes it's things from his home or from friends' homes. So people have to kind of like watch out. It's also, I should point out, the title is Cada Dia, which means every day in Spanish. So that adds another layer. Lavelle has said that a lot, that too much is put into titles. He dislikes titling, but he sometimes titles in a different language because he finds them more expressive, more sensual, more poetic, so that there's less of a chance that someone's going to just try and really directly interpret the piece, and it kind of leaves it a little bit more open-ended. His father was a self-taught photographer, actually, and worked in black and white. So Lavelle grew up seeing black and white images and was very attached to black and white. So he mostly works, or exclusively works, in kind of charcoal drawings as part of that lineage. And we think this is a Windsor chair, so it also kind of touches on the vernacular. This is a very popular chair style throughout American history, and people still have these in their homes today. This is actually a child-sized chair, so when you see it in the gallery, it's small. This was one of our earliest acquisitions as part of the Reilly Initiative last May. In early May, this piece became available. It was created in 2003. It's called Far Beyond the Valley by Radcliffe Bailey. He was born in New Jersey, but spent his life in Atlanta. And his father was a railroad engineer. This piece is just beautiful, and you really cannot see all of the depth and all of the detail in this image. There's glitter and encaustic included. Let me see, I want to just show a few detail shots. You can kind of see the glitter here. There's also glitter applied to this image. So Bailey too works from kind of a family archive of images, and then also found images. So his grandmother gifted him, I think, 400 images in 1992, and many of those images have been the basis for his work since then. And so the image actually comes at the end, which is really surprising. So you can see he works on multiple pieces. I have to thank Radcliffe Bailey, the Magic City, a publication from the Birmingham Museum of Art, for these images. But I think it tells us his way of working. He's working in this fast improvisational style. He's really influenced by jazz. And I think that most people would think that that image was the starting point, but actually it's the end point, added as this final moment of something that's highly referential at the end of his process. So if we go back to this piece, we can also just see the layers of imagery. You see railroad tracks, you see these color blocks that must reference, you know, quilting, the modernist grid. And I want to point out this color right here, which is almost like a mint green. That too, so there's so much in Bailey's like personal lexicon that he doesn't necessarily share with us explicitly, to kind of protect that meaning and protect those family stories. This is something he has told us though. It's a color he's called Palmyra Blue, which is, Palmyra is the name of his grandfather's hometown. And this color is kind of closely related to like a haint blue. But it was the color of a room in his grandfather's house. And so every time you see that color, it's just calling on this memory of Radcliffe Bailey's father. And so the way he works, of course, is this heavy collage style. We see this tree, we see these roots. At the bottom behind the glass, there's like this moss-like, grass-like substance. And it really connects to these ideas of displacement and journey, the Underground Railroad, this rootedness in place. We can see images here of these live oaks, the moon. So just layers and layers that reference personal stories he's been told, but also this larger history, this larger African-American experience, and very broadly American experience too. So Bailey has said he understands why his grandfather was telling him stories, and he kind of sees himself as carrying on as a storyteller, but through these kind of visual works. Let's see. We also recently acquired this piece by John Biggers. John Biggers is another artist with a highly complex kind of visual lexicon that references African American history and kind of religion, and also Southern heritage. So for John Biggers, the Shotgun House is extremely representative of a Southern experience. He grew up in a shotgun house in Gastonia, North Carolina. And then we see him using that form here, repeating again and again and again as like a symbol of community, a neighborhood. A lot of times women are featured prominently for their role in sustaining like cultural values, heritage, and community. We see them holding vessels, which also are signs of Southern heritage. Vessels, these iron pots, you can see turtles, which could signify like endurance and longevity. This carrying on of community and culture. We also see this really prominent railroad track, which could be a suggestion of the Underground Railroad, or also this segregation that is enduring. It's paired with these turtles that suggest kind of continuity. So this kind of the segregation of this neighborhood. Also, you can tell it's highly geometric. So lots of triangles and squares that represent things in African heritage or Egyptian or like Nubian mythology, but also it feels kind of quilt-like in a way too. So there's so much going on in this piece that we actually just received 3 days ago. So The next piece on view is a piece you may have seen, and like I said, in Leticia Huckabee's recent exhibition. She too is really dealing with heritage. She is dealing a lot with the matriarchs in her family. We see pictured here Jessie Washington, her grandmother, who was descended from enslaved people in East Feliciana Parish. And Leticia's family lives along Highway 19. This was part of a project that she started to kind of document her family's history. And you can see it's quilted. She studied with the Gee's Bend quilters and has integrated this adaptation of a wedding pattern. But what she's doing is taking up these historic making methods from her family history. It's all hand stitched. And then she's also contending with this idea that these women were overlooked. So you can see she's put it in a gilt frame. It's a found object. So this push and pull between these historic kind of, this idea of making do and being resourceful, you know, it's heirloom fabrics, it's pieced together. It has this really like humble kind of making style, but at the same time, she's using silk and she's using these frame forms that reference old masterworks to elevate these women who would have otherwise been overlooked in her family. And we were really pleased to get this piece and so happy too that during the time Leticia's mother and aunt were able to visit to see their mother on view in the galleries. She actually worked at LSU. We found out in the course of this like exhibition cycle, which makes it all the more resonant for us to have her included in our galleries now. And so Leticia started as a documentary photographer. She's taken this photo through a window. You can see the pane, the outlines here. You can see this red curtain into her grandmother's house, you know, documentary style, and then reprinted and cut and turned into this quilt, two-dimensional quilt that's framed. And I also just want to point out that this piece was acquired through funds from deaccessioning what used to be our period rooms, a Greek revival plantation house. I'm really pleased that we were able to use the funds in this way. And so overall, I just want to touch on kind of, you know, we can see a real marked moment of collections growth and filling these historic gaps that represent this longer term effort to kind of change the narrative in our galleries and change our collection to be more inclusive. So some of you may have participated in 2016 in what we call the Hack Day. And we also invited Dialogue on Race to kind of critique our Art in Louisiana permanent collection galleries. And those have resulted in some of these targeted acquisitions, changes to text, changes in terms of collection loans. Our collecting plan defined that all of our purchasing dollars would be devoted to works by underrepresented artists back in 2016 and 2017. And then of course, like I said, this huge step forward with the Reilly Initiative being established in February of 2020, starting with really a focus on acquisitions. And then it grew to also include staff training. We joined this Of by For All network, which really has kind of 10 concepts, including community accountability, unlearning, dealing with institutional harm. And so it's really redefining the way our staff is working. And we also created a curatorial fellowship in African American art that we are seeking candidates for right now, actually, to support these acquisitions and research for the permanent collection and really changing the perspectives represented in the galleries. We've also made changes to our internal practices. The collections committee has revised their practices in December of this year. It includes term limits and kind of rethinking, just like I said about Of by For All, unlearning traditional ways of defining expertise and thinking about who should be on those committees, setting term limits and things like that for really healthier practices for future collections growth. And so I just, want to share just the touch already that these collections or these acquisitions have made. This is our gallery before those conversations were had in 2016, our introductory gallery. And then you can see what a difference it made to have Carrie Mae Weems' work in there as an introduction. You turn that corner and you see our silver gallery, beautiful work, immense amount of artistry, but there's an under history there that those were all pieces that were acquired by the families that held those works in plantations. Those were the way you took your wealth with you. Those pieces would have been made by enslaved laborers in New Orleans. And so Carrie Mae's piece, which says, "Sitting upon the ruins of your remains," really is a way to reflect in a different way on all of the wealth represented in our decorative arts collections. And I also wanted to point out the way that this Dred Scott piece featuring this reenactor, Denise Frazier. So another conversation, you know, we have the Civil War battle, we have images from the protest after the shooting of Alton Sterling, and then we have images from this radical reimagining of Dred Scott's slave rebellion reenactment. And so the conversations are really shifting, and it wouldn't be possible without these new acquisitions. And the last thing that I would point out before opening up to questions is that we've initiated this Community Insights project. Our curatorial grad assistant, Kirsten Campbell, she's in the Doctor of Design program, and she started this in the fall. Of course, the pandemic is a terrible time to be inviting people in to give their reflections on work. So we've decided to try a new thing, a new way, and we are just inviting anyone, when you're in the galleries and you find a work that's meaningful to you, to think about taking a moment to reflect on that piece and record using a voice memo, send it to our general museum email with your name, your phone, and just for the sake of tracking the artist and the title of the work. And we will take those entries and hopefully create an audio tour that has more voices than our own curatorial voices in the galleries. So we'd invite you to consider doing that for the permanent collection, whether it's these recent acquisitions that are now on view or the entire Art in Louisiana gallery. And I think with that, Grant, we can just open it up to questions. Did we have anything come through in the chat? Oh, it doesn't look like, I was just reviewing the chat. It doesn't look like anything has come through. I think Madelyn might be waiting to join us for another time in a planned artist talk. Is there a way to virtually view all the pieces in the exhibition? We will be updating our website. So if you go to our website and click on Explore, then you can click on current exhibitions. And if it's not already, I know in the next few days, like I said, some of these acquisitions just came in. So as soon as we have professional photography, we will be putting those up in a slider. A lot of our exhibits are that way. You can really see in the galleries, see close-up images of the individual pieces if you go to our website, Explore, and current exhibitions, also past exhibitions. And then you can also see programs that come up that are associated with exhibitions. All right, well, I think if there are no questions coming through, thank you for that, Angela Rivera. I didn't mean to give anyone homework, but I do hope everyone will be eager to come to the galleries and see these works. This exhibition is on view until September, so we're keeping it up for a while, and there will be some change out. So the acquisitions have continued. There are a few acquisitions as part of the Reilly Initiative that were not shared in this presentation. We have a great Sonia Clark piece that's currently on view at the National Museum of Women in the Arts with her solo exhibition there. So as always, I say this all the time, look for changes in Art in Louisiana galleries. There are other recent acquisitions. There's a great Al Laverne piece on view that's never been seen. Today was just really about the pieces on view as part of this opening of the collection spotlight. So thank you so much for attending and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye, everyone.